Hello, my beautiful souls. So this is a requested video that a couple of you who are watching my videos for the sake of learning tarot asked me for which decks are most recommended for beginners. So I'm going to preface that by saying that decks speak to their readers in a very unique way. And I always recommend that you go pick out a deck that's calling to you. That's going to be very important because in order to be an effective reader, you basically have to connect with the deck. You have to understand the way the deck communicates with you, and you have to be able to communicate effectively with the deck. If you don't connect with the artwork, the imagery, that's going to be a big problem right there most of the time, because a lot of the messages that we intuit from the deck does come from what we see as far as imagery, which is why the artwork on a tarot deck is so important. A lot of people actually collect tarot decks just for the sake of the artwork without even actually being a reader. So that says a lot about how important the art on the cards are and how well you connect with them. But what I will say is, for most people, I could say, not every single person, but most people tend to lean towards the Rider-Waite-Smith archetypes because those are, the most commonly available decks, either actual Rider-Waite-Smith decks or their clones. And as we get into this video, I'll show you what I mean by clones. So the recommendations that I'm going to make in this video are not in any particular order, unless I say this is my number one choice or, something like that. But do take that with a pinch of salt because you have to be able to connect with your deck. If you cannot physically go to a spiritual store or a bookstore where you can find these decks, where you can hold it and feel it and take a glance through the artwork, try to go online and find pictures of, the 78 cards, or at least a good chunk of the cards, so that you kind of know what you are getting into if you purchase that deck and if it really speaks to you. That's going to be really, really important. So I would say a lot of the decks that I have around me today would be, I personally would rate them from beginner to intermediate. So the very first deck that I would recommend, this isn't the first deck that I purchased by any means, but I actually purchased it fairly recently. But after I read the guidebook, I think for a beginner, the guidebook in this deck, as well as of course the imagery, because it is a Rider-Waite-Smith clone basically, would be the Radiant Wise Spirit deck. The guidebook is best in here for beginners. I cannot emphasize it enough, just because of the level and amount of detail that it provides. This is a low Scarabeo deck, so it is manufactured and shipped, or produced basically in Italy. And I love low Scarabeo decks. I have a bajillion low Scarabeo decks. They are absolutely amazing. They read so well. And this is, like I said, a Rider-Waite-Smith clone. And the reason why I like that is because these archetypes are very well known. They're very widely used across the internet. If you watch readings and such, and not just across the internet, in general, the Rider-Waite-Smith system is probably the most popular. There are other systems out there like the Thoth, and I'm still learning Thoth myself. It's very, very different. Of course, there are some similarities and such, but just the way that you read the spreads is way different. So these cards have been used a lot since their short lifespan with me, so they're not in order. but I will just give you like a really quick rundown of what they look like, right? Like this is very traditional Rider-Waite Smith. The colors are different than in the original Rider-Waite Tarot pack, which is what most people begin with. And that one has a decent guidebook as well, which is called The Pictorial Key to the Tarot, based on Arthur Edward Waite's original The Key to the Tarot. So that is also a good deck to start with. The images are going to be exactly the same as these, but the coloration is going to be different. And also these are borderless. 3 out of 4 corners are borderless, which I really like, because the images really pop out in this. They're very almost like 3D. And if you do like hedge crossing work or path workings, something that really pops out at you in a 3D way is probably a really good type of deck to use. But at the same time, these images are very like in your face. They're very upfront. So it's hard to kind of jump into the card or, you know, like embody that character, because it's just in your face. Like it doesn't leave a lot of room for imagination. You see what I mean? Like, yeah, in cards like this, you can see some scenes in the background and, you know, there's some space here. But a deck like this is probably not the choice for like hedge crossing and path work. But if that's not what you're looking to do and you just want to do readings either for yourself or somebody else, then I highly recommend this deck. I highly also recommend the guidebook to this deck, because the guidebook in this version tells you things that I haven't seen in the guidebooks of other versions. So for example, my very first tarot deck that I ever purchased in my life was this one, the original tarot. And the guidebook, I'll show you. Let me just pack this away since I have very limited space. The guidebook in this one is the Key to the Tarot, but all it has is just like some keywords and just a little tiny description of the card. Like, this is the guidebook, the Key to the Tarot, and it's basically like this for each card. Like there isn't really a lot of meat. And as a beginner, when, you know, since this was the very first deck that I ever purchased, I wished that the guidebook gave me more. But the guidebook in this, in the Radiant Wise Spirit Tarot, is absolutely wonderful. See, it's beautiful. It's got color on the front, like it's illustrated in the front. It's got the Lo Scarabeo seal in the back. It's got spreads that you can try. And look at how much meat there is about the cards. You don't have pictures of the cards, which is fine because the cards are labeled, right? You know which card is which. But this guidebook does not skimp on the information that you need to know in terms of how to read your cards. This is exceptionally well done, in my opinion. So if you are a beginner, a brand new, you know, person to tarot, attempting to be able to do and give readings, I would highly recommend this deck for the sake of the guidebook. And yes, of course, the lovely imagery. The colors in this are very popping and mustardy as well. This deck has served its purpose with me. So I like it for the reason that, you know, it was my first deck and I didn't know any other, you know, creator or what was good, what was bad. I just picked it up just because it was Rider-Waite Smith. It seemed like it was the most popular, so there would be the most information out there as far as what I would need in order to understand and read the cards. So I don't really like the colors in this deck, to be honest. Like, the yellows are too yellow. You know, it's like that just bothers me for some reason. And even though it is pretty, like, you know, the sky is the appropriate tone of blue and such, but like these dogs down here, neither of these, at least I don't know how it looks to you guys in the camera, but when I'm looking at it in real life, it's like those are not the actual colors of any of these animals. So I don't know, just for some reason, after I got exposed to the other publishers, the other creators of decks that are Rider-Waite-Smith clones, I just did not like the coloration on this after that. Some of you might, and this is a great deck, don't get me wrong, but as the most disappointed is, as far as what I'm disappointed with, is the guidebook, just because it really skimps on that information. So you can see these are not borderless, these have borders, but these borders really are not thick. Like, they don't bother me as much because you hardly notice them. It's done well enough to where you can still feel like you can get sucked into the artwork, into the painting, without, you know, getting sidetracked by the borders. And a lot of people use their tarot cards for meditations. Like, you know, if there is a certain archetype that you're trying to embody, for example, if you want to be a reader, perhaps you are trying to embody the High Priestess, you know, the divine feminine, intuitive, psychic energy. You're trying to connect to the higher spirit realms. You are trying to connect with your spirit guides and your higher self, and, you know, open your crown chakra. So if you are using your cards to meditate, to open up your third eye, and to kind of, you know, accomplish a certain goal, use the law of attraction to attract a certain outcome or thing or situation to you, then borders, you know, matter. How distracting borders are actually really matters. I like to use my cards for that type of thing as well. And the High Priestess is actually my significator card. So maybe in future videos we'll get into soul cards and significator cards. Soul cards is a relatively new concept to me, and when I first heard it, I didn't know how I felt about that concept of, you know, having a soul deck or soul cards. But after, you know, like meditating on that concept and thinking about it, I definitely do feel like I have a soul deck now, and I'll tell you which one that is in a moment. But I think with this deck, you guys kind of get the idea of, you know, what the artwork and the coloration looks like. And since these are Rider-Waite-Smith clones, they're not diverse. So if having diversity matters to you as far as skin tone, as far as gender identity, as far as sexual orientation and things like that, then for those purposes, I would highly recommend the Modern Witch Tarot. The Modern Witch Tarot is melanated. So you will find people of color in here. You will find just really modern illustrations for things. You know, it's pretty much all inclusive. The guidebook is amazing. The packaging, I love this packaging, and this is also a mass market deck, so this is not difficult to come by. I don't think you have to worry about it being out of print anytime soon. I do have decks that are more vintage and that are not in print anymore, or certain editions are out of print. Look at how gorgeous this guidebook is, right? It's like actually a little book here. And these cards, I mean, look, these are 78 plus 1, so 79 cards here. And the thickness of this alone is like the same as this with a box. So that tells you what amazing cardstock this deck uses. It's truly, truly just gorgeous. And these are, I'll give you some previews of what you're looking at. So, the Rider-Waite-Smith clones like these, the characters are dressed in a very medieval style. And over here you find pretty much all the same, swords are still swords, cups are still cups, but people are dressed in jeans and sweatshirts and skirts and blouses, rather than tunics and like those Roman type robes and whatnot. You find, not people of color, you find people of color, you find different gender identity orientations, like the hanged one instead of the hanged man, which decks like this call them all the hanged man. This leaves room for, people who maybe this is your significator card, and what if you're not a man, and you want something that's more relatable, you want something that's more gender neutral. A deck like this will definitely provide that. And see how like she's got a mini skirt and high heels, and she's got brown hair, and this person is a person of color, and the pages are female in this deck rather than male like the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith. So if you are more into modern artwork, if you want more modern looking archetypes to do readings with, then this is definitely going to be right up your alley. Now, I personally like the vintage style of the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith, and see how you have these pops of color here, like black and then red, and then you have the silver, and the clouds are almost like, they're not white as they are in the other ones. These are like beigeish or like a mocha-y color. So, some of the cards truly do look different here. And the +1 card is this 10 of Swords in 2 variations. So this one is the actual 10 of Swords, right? Where this person is like basically dead. And then the +1 card is the same image, but it says everything is fine. See that? Everything is fine. So you get 1 additional card here. So this is a 79 card tarot deck rather than 78. And again, that is the Modern Witches Tarot. So this is still beginner friendly. I got it when I was a beginner still. And to be honest, as beautiful as this deck is, I haven't used it much. And I probably need to get it out some more because it's a truly nice deck. It's just like what I was saying earlier though, if the artwork doesn't grab you and pull you in, then it's not going to give you as amazing of a reading. I will show you now the original Rider-Waite-Smith deck that I have. You can get it either in a in a little tuck box like this, or like an actual box because it has the like a full guidebook with it. This one just comes with a little leaflet, which is kind of sucky if you're a beginner because you want more detail, right? You want to have like a really good guidebook. To me, that was very, very important because I remember since this was the first deck that I purchased, I actually started looking for other tarot decks that would give me a better guidebook. So that's part of how I started to accumulate a lot of variations on Rider-Waite-Smith. This deck is very, I'm precious about this deck because this has, the original Tudor roses and lilies on the back with the same print as it did in the 1910 edition. The guidebook, like I said, is just this little flimsy leaflet that really doesn't give you that much information. It's just kind of like this. So guidebook wise, it's disappointing, but the cards are so buttery and just, oh, amazing. Now the line work on this is kind of funny. You know, the artwork is very elementary looking on here, but it's precious just because it's original and it's vintage. You know, like especially on the Magician card, like here on the Fool, these colors are extremely contrasted, and a lot of these archetypes, their skin tone looks red, like it's just red. You know, so and the sun is like stark white. It's absolutely like printer paper white. And so, you know, if the coloration is something that's really important to you, like that would distract you or bother you, then this probably isn't your deck. But I definitely think this is a deck that every tarot reader and, you know, serious tarot reader and collector should have, just because it, you know, the sentiment of it, the vintageness of it. I'm trying to find the Magician card here to show you guys. But Pamela Coleman Smith, her nickname is Pixie. So if you are looking online and you read references to Pixie's artwork, it is Pamela Coleman Smith that they are referring to, who is, you know, the original artist chosen to illustrate this deck. Can I find the Magician card to show you? Let's see. And see how this background is just absolutely white. Like it doesn't have the blueness of the sky or anything like that. The grass is very sparse and it almost looks like this Knight of Cups is on desert lands. But at the same time, there's water running across. So it's just very funny the way that it's illustrated. But I still love this deck. I use it pretty much every day, and I couldn't part with it. This is also the first deck that most people tend to end up with. And see how the coloration differs here from what I showed you in the other deck. There's no clouds on the bottom here. You can actually see rain, which you couldn't see on the Modern Witch Tarot. And the clouds are still like brownish, whereas on the Radiant Wise Spirit Tarot, the very first deck that I shared, the clouds were very white and puffy, and I don't know, it's just gorgeously illustrated. But I do adore this deck for that reason. Like, it's very sentimental for me. So I'm very glad that I was able to get my hands on it. The Magician is just hiding today, isn't he? He doesn't want to make his presence known. He doesn't want the funny line work to be called out on his card. Ah, here he is. Here's the Magician. There you go. See how he looks like he has a beer belly and very stubby neck and just a square face, and it's just funny. You know, it's funny how he got drawn in this version, but precious nonetheless. And see how green the background of the Hermit is. It's supposed to be creating this nighttime effect, but I think they kind of missed the bar there. They kind of missed it with that, but still very, very precious. So these are all beginner friendly. Another option that I would recommend to start with is the Rider-Waite-Smith Centennial Edition. That is another precious deck because this has 4 additional art cards from Pixie's artwork that's outside of the tarot, plus it's the Centennial edition. And the coloration is true to what it was intended to be when she created this artwork, when she did the paintings and such for this deck. The backs of it, the vertical line with the squiggles is actually her signature. That is the Tudor rose on the back that, you know, is very well known for being on the original 1910 version that I just showed you. But look at the difference in color here. This is, you know, these are the same muted color tones that she picked for these cards. And these do kind of look sketchy, but in a very sentimental type of way. The pentacles aren't like blaring yellow, they're a more muted tone. And the skin tone on the archetypes here isn't red like it is in the other deck. And this is also very buttery, beautiful cardstock. It's really nice. It's not super thin and it's not super thick. One thing I will say about the Radiant Wise Spirit Tarot is that it is difficult to shuffle because of how thick the cardstock is. So if you are able to feel a deck with your hands to see how thick the cardstock is and how it feels in your hand, because you're gonna have to be handling it and shuffling it and all of that good stuff, that is a really good way to feel out if a deck is good for you. And see how the colors of these animals are way more realistic in this Centennial edition than they were in either this edition here or even in the other one that I just put away. So a lot of difference between the different versions of the decks. And see how much better the line work is here on the Magician. So much better line work here. So that is the Smith-Waite Centennial Edition. Another perfect deck for beginners. If you want keywords that are right on the cards for you as a learner, this deck is called Learning Tarot Cards and it's by Witchy Cauldron. You can find these on Amazon. The backs are kind of neat. They look like that. And they have keywords for you know, reading them upright or reading the challenge position, which is the reversal. Not all readers read reversals. I do. It just depends on how you read with your spirit guides, how your intuition connects with the messages. For me, I've always read reversals. I don't ever read all upright. So this has the chakra center that the card is associated with. It has the glyph for the astrology that it's associated with. It has the yes or no, if you're asking a yes or no question and you get that card, what does it mean? And it's the same thing, like the Page of Swords in this deck is a no card. If you get it in reverse, it would be yes. So, you know, this is a neat deck to kind of begin with. I wouldn't always use this in readings though, because you don't want the keywords to limit your ability to intuit meanings as well. Because sometimes you get into that pattern of thinking that if it doesn't say that as a keyword, then it's not a meaning of the card, and that's totally not true. So the cards have way more meanings than just what is listed on here. And you really have to use your intuition to read because if you just rely on the cards, you're probably going to start getting things wrong. So the pictures are very small here. Most of the room on the card is taken up by this additional information. And then you have like one big keyword here that helps you associate, like Five of Cups associated with loss. And Six of Swords with transitions. The Devil with I am no puppet. I like the way that they said that. That's funny. Yep. And then they have these little, it's time for a sacred pause. Stillness grants perspective. It's like this little line that runs across on the side of the image. I don't know if you can see that well in the camera. But that is another good deck to start with. Now, some little more intermediate decks. I say this is a little more intermediate just because it's an indie deck, or at least it started as an indie deck, now it's mass market, is the Lightseers. I don't connect as much with this art style either. Some of the cards I really like the tower on here and the nature scenes are really great. But one thing I notice about myself is that I don't like modern style artwork personally. I tend to like Baroque era, Art Nouveau, Renaissance. Like that's more up my alley in terms of artwork. I get to see people in modern clothing all day in my life, like everywhere I go, right? But I don't get to see people dressed in tunics and Roman laurels and stuff when I go outside. So for me, like something that's different than what I see in my everyday world, that matters to me. See, like this here, this is the Devil card. And you really have to kind of get to know the imagery on this deck because it won't stand out to you right away about, you know, like which RWS, Rider-Waite-Smith is RWS, you know, which archetype from the RWS system this is really referring to. So, like for example, this is the Ten of Swords. And when we see the Ten of Swords, we're used to seeing somebody laying on the floor with a bunch of swords going through them, right? Like the middle card on the back of this deck, like that's the Ten of Swords. But here, this is the Ten of Swords, and you see this woman like walking into the sunset. So it's totally different from what we're used to seeing. And see how this Three of Swords, it's like this person is being bathed in the blood of this broken or torn heart. This is, what is this card? The Three of Cups. This one maybe you can tell. There are some archetypes that you can tell and some that you just can't. So this is a little bit more intermediate deck for that reason. You will have to, you know, get to know the guidebook and get to know the cards. And of course the cards are labeled. So once you're well versed with traditional Rider-Waite, it should be really easy to tell, you know, to do readings with these cards. Unless you just start with this deck, you know, and then you just read the guidebook thoroughly and, you know, get the challenge and the upright meanings down as far as what this creator, Chris Ann, intended. This is the guidebook. The guidebook on this is amazing too, you guys. It truly, truly is very well written. You have a little picture of the card and you have a very thorough breakdown of how to read the card. I truly admire the way that this guidebook was done. So even if you do choose this as a beginner's deck, it is still a good choice. Pay attention to the guidebook would be my advice. Don't neglect reading the guidebook, connecting with the deck by giving the guidebook a thorough read. The next intermediate deck would be the Tarot Illuminati. This is one of my favorites because it's so old-fashioned. That's truly what drew me to this deck, is just the magnificent artwork, and this is also very inclusive. We get to see settings in China, Japan, the Middle East, Europe, England, pretty much all over the world. So I love how inclusive this deck is with a still old-fashioned type of art style. Like, even if it's modern, it's still old-fashioned. Like the dressing and everything, the era that it is set in is still very old-fashioned, which is what draws me to this. And I love the fact that it's inclusive as well, you know, for people that that's important to. Some people don't care, some people do care. If you have somebody that does care, I always recommend, you know, keeping decks that are inclusive, because people like to see images that they can relate to. And especially since tarot readings are so personal, you know, it's good to be able to relate to and find yourself in that archetype that's coming through for you, not just as a significator card, but just in general. So the artwork in these are very, very different. The pages are called princesses. The knights are princes. And I can't remember if there's like a lord and lady also in here for like the king and queen. I can't recall. But, oh no, it says queen, like we have Queen of Wands here. So yeah, just, it's the prince and princess, so the pages and the knights. So you do have to keep those straight as well in terms of, you know, who's who. It's the page that's a princess, and it's the knight that's a prince. So like that. You guys get the idea. And the backs of this are just gorgeous. I love the way that they created that. The guidebook, again, is just a little flimsy pamphlet, but since I would categorize this as a somewhat intermediate deck, I don't think you really need a guidebook at that point. Like, you might just want to do a brief flip through of, you know, what the creator also intended for the cards, because you do have the traditional archetypal meanings, and then creators and the artists also infuse a little bit of their own meanings into the different decks that they create. So for that reason, I always do give importance to the guidebook, just so that I know, you know, what they intended for us to find during readings when certain cards pop up. This deck, I think it could be argued either way. This is the Morgan Greer deck. I have the tin version just because I think it's absolutely adorable. I love this deck, and there was a vintage copy. I don't know if it's still available. I personally don't have the vintage copy, but I would love to have it someday. These archetypes are also very up close. The backs of these cards are just so cute. They have all stars on them. And the coloration is also very soothing, like this bluish purple. It's almost like something I would put in my baby's nursery is what I feel like. So like I said, these archetypes are still very up close in your face. The Ten of Swords, yeah, it's a little gory, but not horribly. I don't think it would affect anybody. But, you know, it's pretty easy to tell, like, this is the Eight of Wands, this is the Devil card, this is the Hanged Man, like, Six of Swords. They do use Roman numerals, and they don't have words on the cards. So these are numbers only. So I would definitely look into reading tarot by numbers for this deck as well. So I don't see that there should be any problem if this is the first deck you ever picked up as a beginner. It should still serve your purpose, and they're really easy because they very closely conform to the Art of US system and the archetypes. Like, even the High Priestess is still, like, you can tell right away that's the High Priestess. This is the Queen of Pentacles. That's the Magician. You know, it doesn't take you a while to figure out who's who and what's what in this deck. So some would say this is a little bit more advanced, and some would say that it's beginner friendly. I think I would agree that it's beginner friendly. Just keeping in mind, you know, the traditional archetypes and what they stand for and what they mean is really going to help you. So that is the Morgan Greer deck. One of my newer ones that this one I think can also go both ways. This is the Tarot of Mermaids. This is another Los Scarabeo deck. Cannot tell you guys how much I love Los Scarabeo. They really do make the most amazing decks. This one, most of the archetypes are similar here, you know, like the Five of Wands, the conflict, the confusion. This is the Ten of Cups, I think. No, yep, Ten of Cups. The cups are represented by pearls here. And then the, wow, okay, so the Ace of Cups is actually a conch shell. So I would say this wouldn't be that big of a deal to learn as a beginner either, but I would still really recommend just having one deck that is a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. This, I guess, would be considered almost a clone. It's not a clone because they're mermaids, they're not humans. And there are, this is a Rider-Waite-Smith inspired deck. That's a better way to say it. So Rider-Waite-Smith inspired decks are also good for beginners because the archetypes are very similar and some of them are pretty much the same. So like the Four of Wands here, you know, these cards, there are a lot that's obvious. Oh, the Chariot, look at that, I love it. You know, the coloration on this is gorgeous. It's such a watery deck. It really evokes emotion, intuition, fantasy, imagination. You know, it's just this watery realm that we don't get to see in our real life, you know. And it really gives great, accurate reads. Like the readings that I've done with it so far have just been stunning. This is a beautiful, beautiful deck as well as far as the artwork. Oh, look at that Wheel of Fortune. It's just, it's gorgeous. So it depends on your art preferences too, but this, I love mermaids, so it's like right up my alley. I love that. And some of the mermaids have split fins, so they kind of look humanoid, you know, like human legs in a way. And there are a couple of them that are like that. This one isn't one of them, but yeah, as you go through, you'll see some that are, and it's just, you know, as far as this one, it would be a matter of preference. I probably wouldn't make this my very first deck, but you know, if you have one Rider-Waite-Smith deck and then you want something else that's still beginner friendly but a little different, this is probably what I would go for. So that is the Tarot of Mermaids. The guidebook again is this leaflet, which I don't think goes into great detail, and it is in like 4 different languages, I think. So you just have to flip to whichever language you read. And it ends in literally like 2 or 3 pages. So that like there's the card and then they just give you a series of keywords. So that's what the guidebook looks like. So if this was like your second or third tarot deck as a beginner, that would be doable. That's my opinion. But like I say, always connect with your deck. Take time to look at it, really immerse yourself in the artwork, because the artwork is what will speak to you. It's not you know, just about having a particular deck for the sake of having it. It's all these different meanings and intuitive nudges and cues that, you know, every deck speaks in certain ways. Every deck has its strengths and its weaknesses. Another thing that I would recommend is every time you get a new one, you know, after you cleanse it and you put your energy into it, do an interview with the deck. Ask it questions like, you know, what, and do one card pull per question. What is your strength? What is your weakness? Why have you come to me now? What will our relationship be like? Like, ask all those questions that matter for a reader, and your deck will answer. So, and that'll tell you what type of readings you need to use what deck for. Which deck to go to next? Now this one, my opinion, definitely an intermediate deck, and the reason I say that is because it's crows. You cannot tell what a crow is thinking or feeling. Like, it's a crow. You know, you can't read its facial expressions the same way that you can with humans. So you have to know your archetypes already. If you don't, really use the guidebook. And the guidebook in here is pretty good too. Like, it gives you a good chunk of information per card. It's not just a few keywords. So it is very well done. It's not illustrated, but I don't think it's really necessary because these cards are just stunning. Look at the backs. And it's almost like this satiny finish that it feels really good in the hands. Now, I'm not an expert in type of cardstock and all of that. I know what feels good in my hands, and I know what I like to shuffle with. And this is definitely a deck that I like to shuffle with. It doesn't give me paper cuts like some of my other decks do. And it's easy. It's easy on the hands, and I like that. And I love that the borders are not overpowering in this deck. And the messages of crows are powerful for, you know, a multitude of reasons, especially if you are working with certain deities or if you belong to, you know, a certain religious sect. Like, you know, for example, in Hinduism, crows are a symbol of ancestors. For some people who, you know, are in a different practice or, you know, different forms of spirituality, there is a goddess, a deity named the Morrigan, who is associated with crows, or crows are associated with her or are an aspect of her, or something like that. So that people connect with this deck in different sentimental ways. And as you can see, you know, it's a crow that's just doing different activities. Like, this crow is sitting in a tree, and unless you know what the Seven of Pentacles is, you wouldn't know that this crow is patiently waiting for some type of outcome. Like, you just have to know what the Seven of Pentacles means, because you cannot read a crow's facial expressions. If you can, let me know, because that is amazing. I, for one, cannot do that, so... This is definitely an intermediate deck. And, you know, there's a lot of like sigils probably within this deck, you know, like the lemniscate symbol, you have the pentacle symbol, you have just a lot of different things in here. This almost looks like a yin-yang at glance, but that's not what it is. So like, this is the Venus symbol here, Two of Cups. Like, you just have to know these things already when you're coming in to use this deck. So this is why I argue that this is definitely an intermediate deck, and I wouldn't recommend this to a beginner who does not know anything about the archetypes, unless they are willing to do like a depthier with the tarot, where you know, they're just looking to purchase this one deck and really dive deep into it and not look at any other decks, any other forms, and just work with this and get like every ounce of information juiced from it as possible. I mean, look at this. This is so cute. This is the High Priestess, and the crow has a veil. Like, that's just adorable. You know, so it's very well done. But yeah, this is a deck that you would definitely have to do a deep dive with. I would not recommend this to a beginner who doesn't already know what the archetypes are. So there's a little preview of the Crow Tarot for you. And it's created by MJ Cullinane, in case you want to know the name of the creator. That's the box. There is a deck called the Murder of Crows, which is way more confronting. I don't connect with that type of artwork, but some people might, especially if you're looking to do like more shadow work and things like that. That might be more up your alley, but it's definitely kind of, it's got more of a Halloween-y horror type feel to it for me. So I don't think I would use that deck very often if I had it. So that one. Oh, and this one is one of my favorites, the Wild Unknown Tarot. I really, really like this. But this is also, they say it's the beginner's deck. I would disagree, just because you really don't have a lot of imagery to work with. Pretty much, I mean, you see how the back of this card is? The back of the box, that's almost like what the cards are, and I'll show you what I mean here in a second. But this does have a beautiful, juicy guidebook. Look at that, and it's got like almost full page illustrations on one end with the card definitions on the other, and it's enough information to let you learn the archetypes. So again, it very well could be a beginner-friendly deck if you were doing like a depth year with tarot, where you were just kind of diving in and wanting to know the ins and outs of only one deck and use only that one deck to glean everything that you can out of it, rather than having multiple decks in your collection. So it definitely would take some time and dedication if you're brand new. Like, you know, look at that. It has animal imagery. This is the Son of Cups, which is actually the Page of Cups. Or, excuse me, that's the Knight of Cups. The sons are the knights, the pages are the daughters. See, even I can get that mixed up. The Star, like, you know, and this is pretty much inspired by the author, I think, camping in Long Island, New York, or something like that. You know, she would be out in the wilderness, and she pretty much sketched things that she would see and then embellish them with her own imagination, with her artwork. The cardstock on this is very nice. Again, it is, I don't think this is a linen finish, although it could be. It almost feels like a linen finish, so that's very possible, but I'll have to look it up. But see, like, this is just symbols with a number. Like, this is the 7 of Pentacles. So this is the 3 of Pentacles. Unless you know what those things mean, this is going to be a difficult deck to intuit from. But this is also a deck that a lot of younger children, like, you know, 7, 8, 9 years old, are drawn to. I even know some 5 or 6-year-olds that really enjoy this artwork. So, you know, in terms of that, if, you know, if it's a really young person that just wants to fiddle around with tarot, sure, this is a great deck. You know, and they could learn the archetypes in a very different way. But like I said, like this one and the Crow Tarot, those are more for like in-depth individual deck study for newbies. But if an experienced tarot reader got this deck and they'd see the 4 of Swords, and automatically they'd know what the 4 of Swords is. Like, they wouldn't need to refer to an archetype to know what that is. Then this is the perfect deck. And the images aren't confronting and scary, as in some of the decks they really can be. There is an element of mystery and, you know, a little bit of probably like phantasmagoric elements to this deck, but it's actually quite nice, and such unique illustrations and artwork. Just the use of nature is beautiful in this deck. The black and white with pops of color is amazing as well. Like, look at that. That's a gorgeous butterfly. Such such a simple yet beautiful way to depict transformation. Get that just the vast difference between the twos. This is the Two of Wands, and the butterfly that we saw earlier was the Two of Pentacles. If I could find the butterfly again. But, you know, that the symbology of the butterfly is kind of like how the choices we make impact our life, the way that we shape our future. So this is, the entire deck is created and illustrated by Kim Krans herself. She wrote her own guidebook, and this feels just luxurious in your hands. Like, this is also very easy on the hands. It's very bendable. It's not one of those hardbacks that give you paper cuts. I have had so many paper cuts from my deck, believe me. It's really, really nice to find one that's good to your skin. And it's so well packaged too. It's got so many layers of packaging that there's really no chance for you to scuff your cards in transporting them or handling them. It's very well done. Another deck that I enjoy that could be either intermediate or beginner would be the Witch's Tarot. So this one does kind of divert away a little bit from the Rider-Waite-Smith system, just because Ellen Dugan is actually a practicing witch, and she has been for many years, and this deck is based on a true witch's spirituality. So like witches, they don't have a devil figure that they acknowledge, right? So some cards are changed in that sense. Like the devil card would be the shadow side in here. The images are very, you know, it's like a mix of realism and fantasy. So like that, it almost looks like, you know, that like photographs of people were turned into artwork, and it, you know, it could be very appealing if this is your style of artwork. There's a lot of realism in here. I don't think there's much anthropomorphism in here, but realism for sure. And the borders are not overwhelming. Oh, and see the World card. This is the depiction of the Green Man, which is, I believe, like a wise nature spirit, if I'm not wrong, that they acknowledge, that they believe in. So, and the Hierophant becomes the High Priest. These are, you know, like what I was talking about earlier, the archetypes change from the traditional RWS system. So the Hierophant becomes the High Priest, the Wheel of Fortune becomes the Wheel of the Year, the Devil card becomes the shadow side. You have a mermaid here, so there's definitely some fantasy. The Four of Wands, this is such a happy and beautiful card. Nine of Pentacles, another one of my favorites. So even, you know, images like this, where they get the message across, but they're not confronting and gory and just, you know, things that you would have to hide from the general public because they might not like to see it. The Judgment card becomes Karma. So that those are, like, you know, differences that this deck has. See, the Wheel of Fortune is called the Wheel of the Year, the Pagan Wheel of the Year. So those are just some things to keep in mind that do change across decks, and, you know, just based on who the creator is. So it depends on, you know, how quickly you learn to associate those archetypes with what they stand for and what they mean. This could be a beginner's deck if you wanted it to be. And there's the shadow side, the devil card. And this has a excellent guidebook. It's really meaty, has all the information that you could need on a card. So definitely worth it if that's something you like. And the backs are just beautiful. The coloration, the triple moon, all of that is just beautiful. Not as culturally inclusive, but gorgeous. Another deck. See, this is the Thoth, which is a completely different system. I won't even get into that for this video. This deck, this is very well a beginner's deck, I would think. This is the Ethereal Visions Illuminated Tarot. The coloration on this is so soothing. It's very, very soothing. Again, it's Art Nouveau style, which I like. Not diverse at all in the paintings, but just the era that they represent is very, very nice. The backs are beautiful. And this too has 2 additional cards, but the archetypes are very easy to tell once you're familiar with the Rider-Waite-Smith system. The 2 additional cards are like the Artist and the Well or something, so it's, you know, like a 78 plus 2 card deck. But these are so Rider-Waite-Smith inspired that I don't think you're gonna have a hard time at all being a newbie, a new person to tarot, being able to tell what's what and who's who. So cute, so cute. So they're all kind of, you know, color-wise, if you tilt it certain ways, they could look washed out. These here are like the gold foilings that are on each card. The borders are more visible on this, but they're not as overpowering. This deck is one of those that, like, I have to be in the mood for it to pull it out because it has a certain message that it needs to give. But other than that, I kind of just, like, I leave it until I need it. It's one of those decks. So you get the idea. So this definitely could be a beginner-friendly deck. I wouldn't see any issues for a beginner, particularly with this. Let's see. This one. Let me get access to it first. Moving my whole table around here. This, the Green Witch Tarot. This is such a vintagey, gorgeous, gorgeous deck. I absolutely love the style of artwork that's used here. The creator is Anne Mora. Great, great guidebook. It's not in color, but it's so meaty, it's so juicy with all the information that you need to know about your cards. You won't even miss the color. This, especially the back for some reason, just reminds me of Christmas. Like, this is a deck that I absolutely love using around the autumn and Yule seasons. Just, there are a lot of Wiccan references in here. So like the Horned God and the Lady and you know, all of those things. Like the chariot is the battle wagon. So this again is, you will really need to make the guidebook your best friend. If you are just more familiar with the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith archetypes and now you're trying to get to know this deck, it will take some time. Like for example, the Temperance card becomes the Siddhe, and then, you know, the Magician I think has a different name as well. It escapes me at the moment what it is. But it's, and you know, some of the cards like the Seven of Swords is lies, deceit, avoiding in traditional Rider-Waite-Smith, whereas in this deck it means something a lot less problematic, you know, a lot less sinister. So the meanings of some cards as we know it in the traditional RWS, the meanings do change in this deck as well. So this would be really important to pay attention to and make friends with the guidebook. The Empress is the Earth Mother. So yeah, again, a deck that you just really need to get to know. You really need to get to know this deck to be able to effectively use it. But once you do, it really truly gives beautiful, gentle readings. This is like the warm, fuzzy friend deck, right? The friend that you get the warm, fuzzy feelings with. It's like a soul sister that you can stay up all night talking to. And the backs are just amazing. Very Christmassy. I don't think it was intended to be Christmassy, but it is Christmassy. And I like it because that is one of my favorite seasons. Now, one of my newer favorites that I got for the Halloween season is this one. Now, the deck itself isn't new, but I received it somewhat recently. This is beautiful. This is more of like, the book is called Phantasmagoria. You're going to love this guidebook because it's more like reading a storybook than a guidebook, to be honest with you. It's like I could sit down and just make this, you know, the book that I read at night until I finish it. It's really, really good. I love this style of artwork as well. For some people, it could be a little scary. If you don't like vampire or, you know, that kind of fantastical creature imagery, then maybe click off for a couple minutes and then click back on. But this is just, it could also be a very sensual deck. It has some very erotic imagery, and it's also got some very confronting imagery. This is great for shadow work and just delving deep to do, you know, self-assessments and self-improvements and just becoming more fully embodied, accepting all those parts of yourself that you thought you had to hide away. You know, it's a beautiful, beautiful deck to feel more wholesome, whole and embodied as a person with. I truly adore this art style. And I would love to have this out during the Halloween season. Samhain, as some call it. The spooky season. This is really, really great for spooky season. And see, artwork like that is just stunning. It's so beautiful. In a phantasmagoric kind of way. And a lot of, you know, this imagery and what it's meant to evoke is also based on the psychological teachings of Carl Jung. And I do have a psychology degree, and I also have a mental health degree, so that is also right up my alley. I really love that. Look at that. It's like a beautiful fantasy gory. Look at that, in the middle of transformation. What an image right there. absolutely love this deck. This I would definitely say is more of an advanced deck. I wouldn't necessarily give this to a beginner. This definitely feels like more of an advanced deck. So maybe after you've been reading for a couple years, then this would be a good one to delve into. But you could always just get it and keep it until you're ready for it, because everyone's learning pace is different. And if you feel like you've kind of nailed what you needed to nail in basic tarot, then you can just move on to more advanced decks really quickly. Another one that I like, another Los Scarabeo deck, is the Romantic Tarot. This is great for love readings, you guys. I love using this for love readings. And it's just got such a Victorian feel to the artwork. The backs of the cards are stunning. Those roses. And they've got, you know, the women in hoop skirts and all that stuff. Just stuff that I love looking at in art. So this is a really, really great read for romance readings. I wouldn't use this for a non-romance reading. I would definitely only use this for love readings. So that is the catch to it. Like this, I personally I wouldn't use this deck for a non-romance reading, but you definitely could, because the archetypes are very, very RWS. So if you didn't pay attention to, you know, the guidebook meanings of this card, of these cards, you know, and you just looked at, you know, 8 of Swords for 8 of Swords or 10 of Wands for 10 of Wands, then you definitely could use it that way. But if you're really looking to intuit images, or intuit using images on the card, for a non-love reading, this would not be your deck. But for a love reading, highly, 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 1000% recommend. And it's gorgeous. Borders are not overpowering. In fact, it kind of makes it look like the picture is framed. You could very well delve into the scene. And that's important to be able to do. Any other decks? Did I miss any? Last 2 decks. So this one is the Erotic Fantasy. This one is the Tarot of Sexual Magic. You can tell this one's my favorite deck because I have used the heck out of it and the box is all bashed up. This one is becoming a favorite. Could this be a beginner's deck? Yeah, sure, why not? You know, like once you get your first traditional Rider-Waite-Smith deck and you want to try your first other like a love reading new deck or erotic reading new deck, would I go for this? Yeah, heck yeah. Like this one I got fairly early on in my tarot career and I absolutely adore it. This one is also very, very, very nice. Like this is my type of art style too, so that helps. Backs of the cards, beautiful. Archetypes are pretty much like you can tell who's who and what's what. Like I don't think you need to spend a lot of time, like you can tell 10 of Wands, right? Like right off the bat. If you've seen tarot at all and you know 10 of Wands, you'll know right away. Like Knight of Wands here. So could this be a beginner's deck? Yes, absolutely. Would I recommend it? Sure, I would recommend it. So I hope that helps. And most of you who've been following me on my channel have seen me use this deck quite a lot. So I don't think I need to really go into detail with it. But this one you just need to know your archetypes because it's not obvious. So it probably wouldn't be, you know, like the first deck that you learn with. And it's almost like the same as the Romantic Tarot, where unless you're using this for this particular type of reading, you know, it might not make sense unless you just read the cards for the cards and not try to look at the imagery for intuitive messages or hints. So that is the Tarot of Sexual Magic. This is a very, very popular deck. I think every single reader in the world probably has this deck. And it is beautiful. It's not culturally inclusive. It's not gender identity inclusive or sexual orientation inclusive, unfortunately. But it does give very accurate and good reads, and it's beautiful artwork. We just wish in the tarot community that they would be more inclusive. But other than that, I mean, I really enjoy using this deck. So, and I think a majority of readers do. They probably don't care as much when these ones aren't, you know, these older decks, when it wasn't really thought of as much, you know, that they aren't inclusive, but definitely they are making efforts now, you know, in now times to make them more inclusive, because that's very important. And they should be inclusive because everybody should be able to, you know, see themselves in the cards and to identify with the archetypes if they wanted to. So inclusivity is important indeed, but this deck is so old, I think they just probably weren't thinking about it as much at the time because it wasn't being talked about as much at the time. But it's being talked about now, so it's definitely something that they are working to address, which is really, really beautiful and wonderful. All right, so those are my recommendations, not necessarily in any particular order, of recommended decks for beginners to intermediate and advanced. So I do hope that helps. If you are on the tarot journey, let me know your thoughts. Let me know what decks you do have, what you think. You know, I'm always open for a good discussion right here in the comments. So let me know. And I look forward to hearing your guys' comments, your feedback. I hope this is helpful. If you made it to the end of the video, leave me a little crystal ball emoji in the comments. So that is, I love seeing that, to know that you guys actually watched it all. All right, I will link my other platforms also in the video description box if you would like to come follow me on Instagram and TikTok, where I post daily short messages and I post different things on different platforms. I don't duplicate my readings across platforms. You can definitely come and join me there. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. Take care, guys.